So if we're talking about moving into the second part of the branding work, moving from the ideal client to the market scan, the things that you provide that might be different is maybe a holistic solution, for managers that empowers both their performance and their engagement at the same time. You know,
Yes.
so it's not just about maybe when we get to the value, and your value proposition is, yeah, we're going to get the consistency that you
Mhm.
want. Like I could almost see when you start writing copy, like, yeah, sure, when you work with me, I'm going to help you stabilize and build your management bench from the first time, for the first time, no false starts, no mistakes, no bad habits, but also through working with me, I'm also going to create the conditions for your managers to feel empowered and engaged. They will stay with your organization longer and help build your culture as your company grows.
I mean, we could just stop right now.
I don't know what do you, but that's how you're different. Is it's
Right. Yeah.
bespoke. It's you give custom solutions to their organizations and ensure they have a management bench that will propel their growth to the next phase.
Yes. Yes. I mean that, and that's really what it is, because I think that, and so what's difficult about being able to articulate that is you see it for I see it from the solution side, and you have to learn to talk to it the way that you just did. So if someone were to talk to me, I'd rattle off all about the solution, how I can help them, but I might skip over the very nice, concise way that you said it. And it took me hours to get close to what you just said so naturally. So I think that's why going through the steps is really helpful. Because I'll tell you, if I can tell you where I landed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now again, it's not perfect, but it's sort of close. So I said, I work with forward-thinking small to mid-sized businesses that have ambitious growth goals, but don't have the leadership culture to execute their strategies. So it's not as great as yours. I know, right?
No, you go from, we had this conversation. You go from clarity to blah, 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 what everybody else is saying. So, when you have organizations that are trying to grow, these startup, scrappy organizations that have all of this potential for growth, and they're hiring their managers for the first time, and it's like the wild, wild west. Everybody's doing it differently and they don't know how to do it. And they're investing in all these solutions that are kind of one off, but it's not really creating that consistency that they're looking for. What
Yeah.
I do is I create bespoke management development solutions that not only create consistency with the managers, it also creates the conditions for engagement and the foundations for a culture that you can grow on. Like that's what you're talking about. I don't want to talk about blah 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 leadership
Blah, blah,
development. You're using these jargony words.
yes.
There's all jargon. You got to get away from it. You just record
Okay.
yourself, from that. The other thing I'd bring up to you if you're dealing with small to growing companies, and this goes back to another client that I worked with who was taking who was looking at helping companies scale, like their whole vision was the scale and sales. So I did a bunch of research on, what is it that, investors are looking for and what are buyers looking for? And the biggest thing that they talked about, besides being able to have a really good, financial picture and, and all of that kind of stuff, they look for the business underneath the business. And a big
Mm.
part of the business underneath the business is the management bench. So if you're talking to companies that really want to scale and they're looking for investors or they're looking to sell at some point, they have to build the business underneath the business. And one of the things that, doing the research, I don't have this from personal experience because that's not, I worked with the larger
Yeah.
companies that didn't never, they were not going to sell. But just if you are looking for that, I would also do some research to figure out okay, how does this play in the business underneath the business? And building the management capabilities. Because if you're in that small growing phase, these entrepreneurs, the way that the entrepreneurs have to shift their perspective is, when they're in the startup scrappy mode, they're entrepreneurs, then they move into business owners, then they move into business leaders, then they move into executive, like the top person at the top. If they
Mhm.
understand the role of the managers as the people leaders, that will force them to elevate their perspective and you play a key role in the business underneath the business. So you could also I would just do a little bit more research before you put a bow on your brand positioning as
Okay.
part of what you would say is the value. Like, I'm going to help you build this company, that's built on this strong foundation, building it from here because, and talking about it from that standpoint. I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. So I think that is, part of it. And I hadn't, I went back and forth between whether or not like people who are scaling to sell is the right client, only because I'm not quite sure that the priority is there. And so even in sort of thinking about like, well, what does it look like? Like who are the people that I have traditionally helped that are smaller? They were growing, but they weren't like startup tech companies that are just basically like, how can I scale it to a point and then spin it off and try to keep everything as lean as I can until somebody buys it. So I will
Yes.
have to do more research in that area.
So it's these companies that really have their sights set on the scalable success, the sustainable success. So they're moving out of this scrappy startup mode. They got their sights set on scalable success. And therefore, when they are hiring their management, or they're really developing the management, they want to do it right the first time. Right now, it's the wild, wild west. So
Yes.
as we kind of like wrap up what we've been talking about, here's like a few tips that I would probably say is I think for you and maybe others like you really do know what you want to do and why you want to do it. But there's this weird translation that happens is that you go in your head. And so
Yeah.
somewhere from here to here or here is it goes into some sort of gobbledygook of like corporate lingo, and it's like I gotta sell myself. What I would suggest is like stick with your initial, like if you're just talking off the cuff, like record yourself when you're chit chatting with people, and it's like, it's like the Wild Wild West, like that should be on your website.